Andrew Wallace, Federal Member for Fisher, ready to go. Well, we all know that the Sunshine Coast is a great place to live, and I want to make it the place to be for education, employment and retirement. We also know that the construction sector is a vital part of the success of the Sunshine Coast. In fact, it's one of our four main industries. Those four main industries are tourism, retail, construction and health. Now, of those four, three of those industries are the most susceptible in a downturn. And we know that the Treasurer announced yesterday that Australia is in a recession. And retail, tourism and construction are three industries that traditionally hurt the hardest in a recession or in an economic downturn. And look, we know that the construction sector has been powering along through this pandemic, but that is simply not going to last. I spoke, in fact, with a builder down at Aura just the day before yesterday, and he was telling me that he's got 50 jobs on the go right now, but in and around about September, he anticipates that he will have no jobs. There have been so many cancellations of contracts, and that has been expressed to me by many builders up and down the length and breadth of the Sunshine Coast. So I've been working closely with the Treasurer and Michael Sukar, the Assistant Treasurer, to come up with a package that's targeted towards the building industry. Now, the building industry employs around about 1.2 million Australians and represents about 5% of our gross domestic product. But more locally on the Sunshine Coast, the building industry represents around about employs around 20,000 people. Now that's direct employment. On top of that, you've got a very significant number of direct employment. But it's one of our largest employers and one of our most important industries. So we know that because times are going to get tough for the building industry, that a package like Home Builder that was announced just today is going to be so very important for builders and contractors on the Sunshine Coast. So the sort of people that will benefit, and ultimately this is all about jobs, the sort of people that will benefit on the Sunshine Coast will, of course, be your builders. They'll be carpenters, they'll be painters, plumbers, bricklayers, draftsmen, architects, building certifiers. They're just the ones that will be directly benefited from this government grant. So the government grant, the Home Builder grant itself, is a payment of $25,000 that will be made to eligible individuals. So the eligibility requirements are these. So someone must be buying a new home or substantially renovating their existing home. The $25,000 will be paid by the government after the first progress claim to the builder is paid by the homeowner. It will be for new homes and not just for first homeowners. So it's for first homeowners and subsequent homeowners alike for new homes, and for existing homes it will be, the requirements are renovations between $150,000 and $750,000. For new builds, the grant will be capped at $750,000. Now, you might ask why $750,000? Across the country, I should say, the bulk of the state's first homeowner grants are capped at projects at $750,000, and we're trying to provide a scheme that dovetails in with the existing schemes that are operated by the states as best as we possibly can. And as I said, most first homeowner grants are capped at $750,000, so that is a good fit to be able to provide this cap for Home Builder. I'm happy to take any questions in relation to the specifics of eligibility or how this may assist builders and subcontractors, and then we'll throw to some of our industry colleagues.
As far as the 6-month time frame is concerned, I guess, is that long enough, and is there a potential that the government may review towards the end to see, what kind of impact it's having on the construction industry?
Sally, that's a really good question. The eligibility requirements are also that this scheme starts today. So for any contracts that are entered into today to 11:59 on the 31st of December 2020. And why we've done that is because we understand that the building industry is facing an economic cliff. As the jobs wind out that the builders are on and currently working on now, what builders are telling me is that they've got nothing to go on to after the work that they finish today. So what we want to see is activity. We want to bring forward construction. So for mums and dads who are thinking about buying a new home or renovating their existing home, they need to sign a contract starting today, finishing 31st of December. But importantly, the works have to start within 3 months of the contract date. So what that will do is it will force the works to commence sooner rather than later. The government doesn't want to be on the hook for this for an indefinite period of time. The government realises that the building industry is so very important to our economy, and we want to help builders get through what will be a difficult time in the months to come, but we want to ensure that we get out of that assistance as soon as we possibly can. And that's why we've kept a relatively short 6-month window. But that 6-month window is only a time for when contracts can be entered into. The benefit of this program will flow out much longer than that. So it's very likely that the benefits of the home builder scheme will be felt even beyond the end of 2021, however long the construction might take.
I know there were concerns about, cowboys coming in and, taking advantage of this scheme. What kind of safeguards have you got in place to prevent, an incident like the pink bats that we saw?
You're full of really good questions, Sally, and that is an exceptionally good question. The last thing we want to do is replicate Labor's pink bat scheme, where you get cowboys coming into the market that are unlicensed, unregulated, and in fact causing health problems, and we saw those deaths that arose out of the pink bat scheme, those tragic deaths. We don't want to repeat that situation. So the environment, the regulatory environment which we have undertaken with Home Builder will ensure that only builders who were registered or licensed in their respective states before today, before the start of this scheme, will be able to provide the services for the home builder, for the mums and dads that are getting a home built, or for them that are getting their homes renovated. So we won't be in a situation where we'll see cowboys rush into the market and try and steal the work away from licensed contractors who are licensed before today. And I think that's a very, very, if I may say so, a clever policy initiative on behalf of the government, that by requiring this scheme to be for the work to be done by licensed builders, those licensed before today, will prevent those sort of cowboys coming in tomorrow and over the next 6 months.
Andrew, what sort of measures are there such that projects just don't get artificially inflated in their value, and that homeowners will still get, the value today of that $25,000?
Well, you are all full of very good questions, Charles, and that's another good one. That is an exceptionally important aspect of this scheme. Once again, if you hark back to the old Labor Building Education Revolution scheme, where Labor brought in a scheme which 100% funded these projects of building school halls. What we saw out of Labor's old Building Education Revolution scheme was, because the then federal government funded school halls to be built 100% by the Commonwealth coin, schools didn't really have any skin in the game, zero skin in the game. They didn't mind what a school hall cost to be built. So what we saw was a massive overinflation of the cost of building those halls. In this case, because we have a minimum spend of, in the case of renovations, of $150,000, and the same will apply effectively for new house builds. mum and dad or an individual will have to, they'll be stumping up the vast majority of the costs. The government is only funding $25,000. So that's effectively 1 to a ratio of 6. So that's really important to recognise. There will be significant skin in the game from individuals, and I'm absolutely sure that because they do have that skin in the game, they'll be wanting to ensure that they get the best value for money that they possibly can.
So it's really going to be, because it's the individuals that make application for this grant, it really is incumbent upon them to make sure that they ensure that they get the value out of that grant for whatever project they may be.
Well, when, for instance, if people are buying a new house, it's a new house, Will might be able to give you a bit better figure of today's figures, but let's say on the Sunshine Coast, just for the house component, it might be, say, $200,000. Mum and dad are getting a grant of $25,000, so a little over 10%. They're stumping up the other 90%. So they are going to want to ensure that, as best as possible, that they're still getting good value for money. Just because they're getting a $25,000 grant doesn't, I believe, obviate the requirement for them to ensure they're getting good value for money. And the other thing too is that because this is only a 6-month program, we don't believe that we will see an artificial inflation in prices going forward. Because it's targeted, because it is only a short-term stimulus package, we think that and the reality is, of course, that the economic drivers in the housing sector, there's a lot of competition at the moment, and we believe that coupled with that competition, we'll see an effective means of controlling prices, and that we won't see those sort of out of control prices that we've seen under Labor's building education revolution.
How laborious is that application process going to be? Is it going to be a simple process, a complex process? Has anybody estimated how long it's sort of going to take to run through that process of presenting a contract and ensuring that it's applicable under this scheme?
So the way that the implementation will be done will be through all of the various state state revenue officers. So the state revenue officers will be responsible for implementing this scheme. We're not in the business in the federal government of winding out this sort of a package. We want to utilise the existing schemes that are run by the states today to make it as seamless as we possibly can. Now, the sign-on of the states, this will be subject to all of the states signing on, but we've got national cabinet agreement on this, so it's a bit of a formality. But my understanding is that the state revenue officers of each state will be actually responsible for implementing it. It's obviously my hope and desire that the application process is as simple as we possibly can. Both state and federal governments are getting relatively adept at these sorts of things now, and the state revenue officers have been rolling out things like first homeowner grants for some time, so I don't anticipate that being a particular problem.
Beautiful.
Great. All right.
Carl
Nancaro is from the UDIA, so we might go to him first, and he can speak to the benefit of the scheme from a UDIA perspective.
Run all good? Beautiful. All right, so we'll just get a name and title to start.
Yep, so Carl Nancaro. I'm the construction manager for McNab Sunshine Coast.
Great. And Carl, probably best just to look right down the centre.
Yep.
Just ignore me.
Okay.
Elena will stand in between the cameras, and if you just look at Elena.
Beautiful. So can you tell us about your reaction to today's news?
Yeah, look, I think the grant that the federal government has announced is a great start, and will provide a great underpinning for the construction industry generally, but I think more so particularly here on the Sunshine Coast. When we look at full-time equivalent employment here on the Sunshine Coast, the construction sector is the largest employment sector that we have here on the coast, and even more so with the recent downturn across a number of our other industries, so it's critically important.
What kind of downturn were we facing in the industry had this stimulus not come through?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's been a lot of research and data that's been put into that, and those forecasts are anywhere from 30% to 50% downgrades, depending on which part of the sector that you're in. So it's quite significant and would have had a large impact on employment generally here on the Sunshine Coast. So this grant will be great to support that.
Hard to tell because you don't have a crystal ball, but will it be enough?
Oh, look, time will tell. Whether that is in fact the case. I think the real opportunity that we've got now at the moment is actually for the state government to actually step up and match these grants and underpin what the federal government have stepped up to the plate with.
And do you think these sorts of grants are going to give the people who might be sitting on the fence some motivation to say, well, gee whiz, if we really did leap, we'd get a better value out of what we plan to do?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. So there will be a lot of people out there in the current economic climate that were, as you say, sitting on the fence and waiting to see whether they wanted to proceed. So this may well just be the stimulus that they need to actually push the button and get those jobs going. As Andrew alluded to before, I mean, we are in a very competitive market at the moment, so there's going to be some great buying opportunities for people who want to invest in renovations or new home builds.
So let's following on from that, do we have any idea on how many buyers are waiting in the wings right now on the coast?
I couldn't talk to that at the moment. Will might be able to offer some more stats on that.
I don't think we can ask you anything more. All good?
All right.
That was great, thank you.
Everybody defers the hard ones to me.
Will?
I'm Will Wilson, the Sunshine Coast Regional Manager from Astor Builders.
Great, talk us through your reaction today.
So we think this is a great program. As has been alluded to by Andrew and Carl, the employment numbers here on the coast is huge in construction. There are upwards of 18,000, 20,000 direct employees and a huge number of indirect employees. We as the building industry, especially in the residential market, have been staring at the cliff. We've been looking at the edge of the cliff. I've been receiving phone calls from builders over the last couple of months saying, what do I do next? I've got no inquiry. I've got no contracts that are signed. The contracts that I signed before the restrictions came on, 2 out of 3 of those have actually been either put on hold or completely cancelled. So whilst you drive around the coast right now and you see construction everywhere, all of that is the jobs that were on the go before the restrictions came into place. Everyone is rushing to get those jobs done as quickly as possible, because if the economic circumstances change of the client, that could change the ability to complete the jobs. So everybody's pushing really hard right now. We've seen a good little boost of inquiry and of sales after the restrictions eased and the display villages opened up. But again, we think that's just a short-term boost. We think that that's going to drop again, as it happened in WA when they opened up. I've spent all morning talking to builders, and I've spent all morning talking to homeowners. Excited, elated. This will mean the difference between yes and no for some. It will mean the difference between now and in 6 months, 2 years for some. This will mean the difference between working over the next 6 months and not working for some. So we think it's a great opportunity. As Carl said, we'd love to see the state add to that. First homeowners grant is fantastic. Those people have the opportunity for 40,000. 40,000 for a new home would be more powerful than 25, but it will certainly make a huge difference.
You mentioned you're hoping the Queensland Government will jump on board. What additional support are you hoping they'll provide? Are you hoping that they'll increase that grant or expand it further, perhaps to include other people?
Whatever they do would be great. If they can match what the government's done, the 750 new homes, resident owners, and 150 to 750 for renovations, that'd be fantastic. Any little bit will help. Any additional money will mean that many more people who can, as opposed to can't, or can do sooner, as opposed to later.
And as far as the renovation grants concerned, what do you anticipate the uptake of that will be on the coast, as it's an interesting kind of criteria?
It is. I think it will be less than the new homes. However, there are a huge number of existing older homes, some of which are still clad in asbestos, in an amazing location. So again, it represents an opportunity for people that have one of those homes and want to upgrade and improve their lifestyle to have a $25,000 boost, which could make it possible now as opposed to later, or possible to keep that home and improve that site rather than move to somewhere new.
I suppose same questions before. How many people could we expect to take advantage of this here on the coast?
I left my crystal ball at home. I do apologise. We do have a burgeoning population that has been affected by the state borders shutting down and all the rest. However, we've been seeing a really good uptake. We were just starting to see a positive increase in building approvals and building numbers before this started. So I do think there's a reasonable pent-up demand. I don't have numbers to hand.
Happy days.
Thanks, Will. Adrian.
Oh, I'm shorter than Will.
Not often.
It's a good way to start.
Not the shortest.
Just getting older, Adrian.
Adrian Allen, Regional Manager, Stockland Sunshine Coast.
Excellent. Talk us through your reaction.
We welcome this announcement. It's a powerful initiative to help revive the Australian economy, and we know that people want to get back on with their life. There's decisions that have been impacted by this pandemic. Building confidence, getting the economy going is really important, so we welcome the announcement today.
Can you talk us through what the situation is as far as Stockland's concerned? I know there has been a lot of growth here on the coast.
Yeah, look, 2020 was shaping up to be a really positive year for the Sunshine Coast. Typically, about 2,000 new houses are built each year, and we were expecting something of that order. COVID-19 came along and we've seen a fairly sharp decline in demand for new housing. Our hope is that this stimulus gets us back somewhere to those levels, and that will help support the economy and the 20,000 construction jobs on the Sunshine Coast.
Anecdotally, how have you found it? You obviously produce lots and lots of homes on the Sunshine Coast. Is it people, are they putting it off, waiting and seeing? How do you read what's happening out there?
Oh, look, what we've seen through the pandemic is there were some people who were already moving forward with constructing houses, and that's the activity that we see here. But you ask people to stay at home, you ask people to self-isolate, people take time to reflect, and obviously these big lifestyle decisions get put on hold. So that's what we've seen. We've seen, a decline of people looking to move forward on building houses.
And as far as like the Aura Estate's concerned, for example, how significant will this grant be as far as expanding that area further?
We see this grant being very helpful for Aura and the Sunshine Coast. House construction, that $750,000 limit, that's typically what we see the majority of houses being built here on the Sunshine Coast. So we think that it will be positive. It will help the people who were thinking of building a new home to make that decision. And we expect that other people in Queensland and Australia will make some decisions about do they want to live in other states, and they'll see the lifestyle and livability that we have in this region as something that's attractive. And so we think we'll see a bit of that. Those people choose to make that decision and come here as well.
And do you think once people have made that commitment to take up that grant, that it will start creating its own confidence?
Look, the ABS consistently outlined that for every dollar spent in construction, we see $3 flow through the economy. That's why this is such a powerful tool that the federal government have announced today, and that's why this region needs to take advantage of it. It's important for confidence, but it also helps the broader economy on the Sunshine Coast.
Do we have enough space for all these people that are going to be building new homes here?
I think the state and federal governments, the local governments, have very well planned out how construction and development will occur. We'll be able to accommodate the demand. We're not expecting to see demand, shoot past what we typically see. I think this stimulus is about getting it back to what we'd normally see on the Sunshine Coast.
Beautiful.
just add something to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm calling on Anastasia Palaszczuk to match the federal government's $25,000 home builder grant. Now, currently, the state government, the Queensland state government, has a $15,000 first homeowner grant, but as the name implies, that is only applicable to first homeowners. What I'd like to see Anastasia Palaszczuk do is top up the $15,000 first homeowner grant with $10,000 for first homeowners to match what we're offering, and for people who are not first homeowners to match the Commonwealth Government's $25,000. That will provide a $50,000 shot in the arm for mums and dads who are wanting to build a new home or to renovate their existing home. And I'm calling upon Anastasia Palaszczuk to match our federal government funding, to come out today and to make that commitment. All right, thanks very much.